Hi, my name's Phil. I'd like to talk about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss reports that Boris Johnson is being advised to lay the groundwork for another Scottish independence referendum, potentially in the near future. And no, I don't mean he's been advised by the SNP. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So there was a report in the Times, which is a pro-Conservative newspaper, that Conservative Peter Duncan, who is a former Scottish Conservative chairman, has urged Boris Johnson to allow another independence referendum if the SNP win a majority in the Scottish parliamentary elections, which should be happening next year. Now, obviously we know Boris Johnson's argument against this. He said that Nicola Sturgeon, who is the First Minister of Scotland and the leader of the SNP, promised that the referendum a few years ago would be a once-in-a-generation event. Absolutely. But the Conservative government also promised that a vote to remain in the UK was a vote to be an influential player in the EU. So you could argue, given that the Conservative government have broken that wee promise, that it doesn't really hold any water anymore. Now, I'm not going to get into the arguments of principle in this particular video. I've done those before. And also, Boris Johnson is not exactly to be swayed by matters of principle, but only a matter of personal advantage. So I want to focus on what might the personal advantage, or at least the advantage to the Conservative Party, be in supporting such a move. Now, first of all, one of the major campaigning points for the SNP during last year's Westminster elections was that a vote for them was not a vote for Scottish independence. Now, I said at the time during the election, a lot of people will be voting for the SNP, and the SNP will take that as a vote for independence. And if the SNP win a lot of seats, as of course they were predicted to do, that would provide a real impetus for independence. And a lot of people from Scotland were telling me, no, and some were pro-independence, actual normal supporters of the SNP, if we can use that term. And so that is that they support the SNP and want independence. And then there were those who were just Scottish voters, and they were going, no, look, they're promising, in their literature, they're saying that this isn't a vote for independence. It's a vote because the SNP were positioning themselves as the only party that could credibly stand up for the people of Scotland type thing. Certainly other opposition parties were in some disarray, not just in Scotland, but throughout the country. Okay, that's fine. But then, as I noted, that as soon as those results came in, the SNP said, aha, independence. But nonetheless, their campaigning, absolutely, was designed to attract those who were not in favour of independence to support the SNP on domestic issues. Now, that argument can still apply in the Scottish elections next year. And just as in the Westminster elections, if the SNP, win big, as they may well do, in fact, that you could argue they very likely will do, then again they will use it as extra impetus for Scottish independence referendum. So one argument straight away for adopting this policy of saying, okay, if the SNP win a majority in the Holyrood elections, the Scottish parliamentary elections next year, then we should allow another Scottish referendum. One argument for doing that is you basically say to voters, no matter what the SNP say, if you vote for the SNP, you are voting for independence. You are at the very least voting for another referendum, which of course risks independence. Because that will be the reality of it, because Westminster will say, if they win a majority, we're not going to object to another referendum. So there we go. And polls are suggesting that there is a small majority now potentially in favour of independence. So if you're a Scottish voter, and let's say you are told that the SNP winning the elections next year means risking the union, and you yourself are a unionist, then surely you would be much less likely, particularly if you were a firm unionist, you would be very unlikely, in fact, to vote for the SNP. Unless, of course, as I say, you actually wanted independence. Now, this would still be predicated on the other parties shaping up their campaign game and offering a genuine alternative for Scottish voters, but that is on them. In addition, you have to consider that some of the drivers for this swing, because it has been a very significant swing in the last year towards independence, a lot of that has been driven by the notion that the government in Westminster does not give a crap about Scotland, and worse, that it sees them as nothing more than serfs. Don't take it the wrong way, the current government see us all as serfs, not just Scots. And denying another independence vote when the promises made by the Conservative government during the last one have been broken, and when the SNP are by far the most popular Scottish party in Westminster, and would also have a majority in Scotland itself. I mean, under this proposal, if you were a Scot, let's say you weren't fully on board with independence, but you could go one way, could go the other. You weren't necessarily opposed to it. I mean, wouldn't you support one just out of rebellion against the Etonian upstart in number 10? I think I would. And granting independence independence referendum under certain conditions would be a form of engagement that would let the people of Scotland know that actually it's their voice that matters. Because this wouldn't be Boris Johnson saying no to a referendum, and it wouldn't be Boris Johnson saying we should have a referendum. This would be Boris Johnson saying to Scotland, do you want a referendum? Nicola Sturgeon says you do. I don't think you do. Do you know what? It's not up to either of us. It's up to you guys. What do you want? Scottish elections there. If you vote the SNP into a majority, that means you want another independence referendum. And that means their voice matters. You're saying that their voice matters, which at the moment, it's difficult to argue that it does. In fact, Peter Duncan, who is the Conservative arguing for this, has made the point that refusing an independence referendum, when under those circumstances the SNP hold the vast majority of Scottish seats in Westminster and would hold a majority in the Scottish Parliament as well, I mean, that's as clear a mandate as you can get. And blocking that clear mandate would backfire, he says. Boris Johnson is, in his words, fanning the flames for independence. The Times were also reporting that actual political advisors in Downing Street, so those close to Boris Johnson, are also starting to make this argument to him. So it's not as fanciful as you might imagine. This isn't just someone who's sort of in the party but not necessarily listened to by Johnson saying it. Johnson's own advisors are starting to move towards this. So Boris Johnson is being advised that the best approach would be to sort out the position nice and early as well, not let it drag on, nice and early, and let the people of Scotland know that their vote next year will count for more than, who they want to handle their devolved affairs, but how they manage their very sovereignty. Something Boris Johnson pretends to know all about. And from my point of view, personally, I would throw into the mix that support for independence, of course, has been rising in Scotland. And it's been due to a particular political climate. It's a combination of a couple of things, all of which can be basically lumped into Conservative Party. And that hasn't gone away. And you know what? It's not going to go away for some years at the very least. Only a fool would think that that consequential support, that rising support, will do anything other than carry on rising. So if you're not prepared to change the political climate that is supporting those calls for independence, and that's not realistic, then the obvious course of action is to tackle it head on before it becomes inevitable. So I would say that if Boris Johnson heeds this advice and does so quickly, the quicker the better. The quicker the better. Because until he does this, all the time the SNP are saying Westminster doesn't listen to you. They don't give you a voice. All the time, all the time. They won't be able to do that if Johnson was to announce this. Now, we all know, of course, he's not one for announcing things in a timely manner, only being forced into things when it's too late for him to get any credit. But there it is. But yeah, I mean, delay only makes the situation worse. He should have learnt that, if nothing else, than from the exams mess. But then if he does, it does several things. So first of all, it then makes it less likely that the SNP would win a majority. Not saying it wouldn't mean that, But it would be less likely because there would be fewer people, because everyone would now know if you vote for the SNP, never mind who you want to run the Scottish Parliament, from a domestic point of view, if you vote for the SNP, you are paving the way for that independence referendum. So you make it less likely, in which case his perfectly reasonable conditions, because they are perfectly reasonable conditions, won't have been met, in which case it's carry on as you were. There you go. Debate over. Second, if the SNP do win a majority anyway, which, you know, at the moment you would say is probably still likely, then you have a lot better chance of winning that referendum next year because it's something you engaged in. You weren't forced into it. And certainly you're more likely to win it next year than, say, a few years down the road when it's only going to get worse. I mean, frankly, I'd have wanted it this year. You know, given that Brexit is also a key driver for support for independence broadly, and the SNP in particular, I shudder to think what the realities of leaving the transition period under Boris Johnson's grand plan is going to do for the unionist side. But that situation is not going to get better as we leave it longer. And three, it also means that Scotland is being given an actual route to another referendum via the democratic process. You know, this wouldn't be Nicola Sturgeon providing an independence referendum, and it wouldn't be Boris Johnson. It would be the people of Scotland deciding, and then Nicola Sturgeon and Boris Johnson just facilitating what the Scottish people will have said. And, you know, it's not quite as baked in as it is for Northern Ireland, for example. It's not going to be written into law. But for the short term, it's just as good from practical purposes. And the converse, of course, is also true if Boris Johnson stubbornly sticks to only listening to people who make him fail. Hi, Dominic. He will make it more likely that the SNP will bolster their power. He will make it more likely that a referendum will be all but impossible to win when inevitably the pressure becomes too great and it has to happen. And you further alienate the people of Scotland, who will see Johnson as nothing more than a tyrant, and you just divide the United Kingdom in real terms, even if not in legal and constitutional terms. And of course he is a tyrant. I mean, that is an accurate perception, but it's not really helpful. Now, and I know some people will say, and this is perfectly true, that the cause could be lost anyway. And that if all of this happens, although, yes, you make it less likely the SNP would win a majority, but they still could. And then if they do, you have to have the referendum. And yes, okay, if you haven't blocked it, and you haven't been seen to be blocking it, if you've actually facilitated it and let it up to the Scottish people, you then make it easier to win the case for union. But again, could lose it. It could be that too much damage has already been done. But at the same time, it's the best shot. It has to be the best shot. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you have, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.